it's a slight digression is that he's been on a tear about George Soros, um, and that he's that Soros is hates humanity, and it was a travesty that he got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he his hatred of humanity includes hatred of Israel, and he's trying to set up a fake asylum program to destroy America and Europe. And I wrote a piece for Slate that I will put in the show notes for this, basically acknowledging that in addition to being anti-Semitic, which is what it is when you go beyond criticism and into assigning a Jewish person agency over the destruction of humanity. This is also projection, right? Because you're doing the very, like, you're saying this person is trying to destabilize civilization while tweeting at the King of England that he should overthrow his government. So this brings me to my next point, which is that evidently Elon Musk is not content to play in our most powerful sandbox in the world. He's also gone further afield, doing things like boosting support for the far right party in Germany ahead of their elections, the AfD. And also, Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about like what is going on? Wait, what is this? What is the? And I understand that the roots of this scandal from a decade ago are indeed quite tragic, but
Yeah.
like it's been dredged up and politicized and blown out of. I mean, just really, this is the word disinformation doesn't really capture what's going on here. So if you could just if you could just explain to our listeners what Elon Musk is doing with respect to the UK.
So I will try. This goes back to a relatively long-standing scandal around grooming gangs in the UK, which were predominantly gangs of Asian men who were sexually assaulting and raping and grooming young girls. Not exclusively, I think, but including white girls. And there are clearly racial dimensions to that in terms of the way that that could be discussed by some parties, irrespective of the fact it's also a crime that needed to be prosecuted and dealt with. This came to light some time ago, and it came to light at a time around the time when Keir Starmer, who's obviously now the Prime Minister, was the head of the Department for Public Prosecutions in the UK. So he was directly involved in this, but in the context of prosecuting the people responsible, which he did. So there's no suggestion that he wasn't prosecuting them, and B, he changed some of the processes within the Department for Public Prosecutions, Crown Prosecution Service, to make it easier for these prosecutions to happen in ways that I'm not going to go into because, frankly, I don't know the detail of it. But there is no serious suggestion that he didn't think that this was a serious issue that needed to be dealt with, and he did indeed deal with them. Because there have been a number of instances of these happening, and there have been cases of local councils and councillors and local officials maybe covering things up, but maybe not acting in ways that they should have done, and where some of the alleged problem around this is that people were nervous of being accused of being racist if they went after gangs of Asian men, and therefore they didn't go as hard on them as they might otherwise have done. That's the allegation. There's an undertone of that which has been picked up by, frankly, by racists in particular, in ways that you can understand. And there have also been issues where in individual councils, particular officials and councillors have got into trouble, have potentially lost their jobs, and so on over the years. And in addition to the police investigations, the various trials that have happened, there was a major inquiry into child sexual abuse, which was not just about grooming. It was about the whole sort of gamut of child sexual abuse, which lasted for about 6 years. The inquiry lasted for about 6 years and completed its work a few years ago, but hasn't yet been implemented. And then a number of local investigations as well, and local inquiries. There have been a few occasions where local councils have said, we haven't really got the resources to do the sorts of inquiries we'd like to do. Could you, the government, pay for this to happen instead? And successive governments, the Tories and the Labour government, have both said, no, you've got to do this yourself. There are other things going on. So that happened under the Tories, and it's happened again under Labour. The most recent time when a request for an inquiry by Oldham Council has been rejected by the government was in October this year, when Jess Phillips, who's the safeguarding minister, said, again, no, you can't have national money to do this work. Nobody noticed for a bit. The Tories didn't say anything about it. Elon Musk didn't say anything about it. It was a relatively boring letter from a minister to a council, and then it got picked up a couple of months later, 3 months later, and suddenly became a scandal in which Jess Phillips, who is a bit of a cause celeb because, frankly, because she's a feminist, a relatively outspoken feminist, has been accused of, collusion in the rape of underage girls, in which Keir Starmer has been accused of trying to cover things up, although there's never any detail on what exactly he's supposed to have covered up, because I don't think there's any credible allegation that he did. In which Elon Musk has got involved and started accusing the entire British state of being of colluding in mass rape, and, as you said, calling on the king to dissolve Parliament in order to facilitate a new election, which on current polling Labour might well win anyway, but that's sort of beside the point. Um, the I tried to look the other day. I'm not on Twitter anymore as much as I used to be, which is probably quite healthy for everyone involved. But I did have a look the other day to try and find a particular tweet that I'd seen reported that Elon Musk had made, and I was astonished by how far you have to go down the timeline of Elon Musk's tweets to find a tweet from yesterday, let alone
Yep.
last week. He is spending an inordinate amount of time for someone who is supposed to be, preparing to be a major government figure, looking at Twitter and interacting with people from what are in the UK the political fringes.
Hmm.
And so a British journalist, a French journalist working in the UK, Marie Leconte, said the other day, had an interesting theory the other day, that the reason that Musk has got so involved in UK politics is that, for whatever reason, he is up between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. in the US, when there's not a lot of US politics going on. And the Anglosphere country that is alive and well and tweeting about politics at that time of day is the UK, and so he just gets involved in that. And to a lesser extent in Germany, although he doesn't speak German, but they are in a similar time zone to us. Anyway, this has now led to it getting picked up in national media, because it is a story when a major government figure says, or a major future government figure in the US says that the government of the UK should be overthrown. It is not normal diplomatic behaviour for a government to be calling for the overthrow of a peaceful, non-dictatorial foreign government that isn't at war with anybody. But this is where we are. And the question of how the government should respond is actually quite a tricky one, because it encompasses, how do you deal with the government of a major A, ally, and B, economic power, when one of its officials is saying that you are colluding with rape gangs. The opposition party, under Kemi Badenoch, the new leader, has decided to basically back Musk, and to call for the inquiry that Musk has been calling for. And today is holding a completely, in parliamentary terms, completely bizarre vote, in which they've put an amendment to a piece of education legislation to say, we oppose this education legislation, and and instead of having this education bill, we should have an inquiry into grooming gangs, which is a completely separate proposition entirely. So we're now in a situation where that vote will fail, but the opposition has engineered a parliamentary event to try and embarrass Labour MPs who won't vote for their motion, which will lead to them being able to say Labour MPs voted against a grooming inquiry.
And
Um,
what's so interesting about them choosing to embrace this tactic is that they're already seeing that he's going farther than they are comfortable with, right?
yeah,
Like, reportedly, Tories have already said to Trump people, "Hey, could you please stop Musk from calling for the release of far right activist Tommy Robinson? That's too
yeah,
far for us." You've already seen Nigel Farage, right? See, like, oh, you get burned, right? Because
yeah.
Musk said that he should.
So this is really
Right.
interesting. So Tommy Robinson is a far right activist who is relatively well known in the UK, and someone who has sometimes attempted to get involved in more mainstream parties. He's tried to be part of Nigel Farage's Reform Party, but has a background in explicitly far right activism, and in particular Islamophobic activism. But it's not just that. And Farage, you can say that it's for principled reasons, or you can say that it's for pragmatic reasons of political self-interest, has always held the line against that. Elon Musk, for whatever reason, whether it's political naivety or just straightforward racism, clearly doesn't have a problem with what Tommy Robinson is saying, and has had very public disagreement with Farage about whether Robinson ought to be a mainstream figure within UK politics. Kemi Badenoch is in not quite the same place on Tommy Robinson, um, but she has decided to follow him down the line of, calling for the inquiry. Now, what's quite interesting about the way that this has been covered is Keir Starmer said on Monday that people were jumping on a far right bandwagon by calling for this inquiry. And it's interesting because, on the one hand, having an inquiry into grooming gangs, you may or may not agree with it, but it's not an inherently insane thing to be calling for. And it's not an inherently far right position to think that there should be one. But those calls, as a matter of fact, have
Right.
been led by the far right. And so, it's an interesting, it's a rhetorical trick, really. So Starmer says these people are jumping on a far right bandwagon, and some of the right wing press and some of the Tories have said, hang on a minute, what are you doing calling us far right? And that's not quite what's happening. And it's a bit like what happened in America a few years ago when Hillary Clinton talked about deplorables. If you remember, it was the same rhetorical move, actually. She said that some people who are on this side of politics are people you might describe as deplorables. That is not the same as saying that 50% of the American population are in that bracket, but nevertheless, it leads to an argument that people can jump on. So now the political mainstream right in the UK is saying, how dare you call us far right, when that's not what's actually going on at all. But there are far right elements to this.